Well, I wasn't really going to start. I was just going to, chat with a few people. But if you're going to be nice enough to applaud, I'll go ahead and start. Yes, thank you. Nicest audience in the world. Hi, I'm Robert McBride of All Classical Portland. And Carlos isn't here yet, but I'm sure he will arrive shortly because I'm sure he wants to conduct the concert tonight because there's a lot of interesting music on it. I was kind of hoping for a full moon tonight, but we have half a moon. But maybe that means you can leave with only one empty arm. Does anybody have any idea what I'm talking about? All right. Decades ago, somebody put some words on a melody by Rachmaninoff and turned it into a pop song called Full Moon and Empty Arms. And that melody comes from the slow movement of the concerto that we'll be hearing tonight. Gary Larson riffed on that in one of his Far Side cartoons with this kind of stupid-looking guy looking out the window at the full moon rather vacantly with the caption, "Full Moon and Empty Head." So it's good to know about pop songs that come from classical music so you can, get these weird cartoons, like guys like Gary Larson. So if you're like me and you like variety, you'll like this concert because all the pieces are so different, even though the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto and the Debussy Nocturnes were written at the same time, the very end of the 19th century and the very beginning of the 20th. They're very different pieces from each other. And then in between, a Haydn Symphony written a couple of centuries before. That Haydn Symphony, number 53, will be part of an upcoming CD by the Oregon Symphony devoted entirely to Haydn symphonies. But it's not being recorded tonight. You'd be able to tell if it were being recorded tonight because there'd be more microphones strewn around. So I think what they might do is the same thing they did with the Copland Third Symphony, where they had separate concerts so you could come and be part of the recording process. So I don't encourage you to make noise tonight just because it's not being recorded, but I guess it would be less of an intrusion tonight than it would be next time with all those microphones watching and listening to your every move. Claude Debussy, fascinating, wonderful composer, most famous work, Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun, written in the 1890s, which I've always thought of as the beginning of 20th century music, a few years early. And right after that, he wrote the three nocturnes that will begin the concert tonight. And they were kind of a struggle for him, went through various phases, even a violin concerto, supposedly, at one point. Then he ended up with three movements. The first and third are nature-oriented, and they're very impressionistic. They don't tell anything as much as suggest and allude to water, in the case of the third movement, inspired by the ocean, and clouds in the sky, inspired, the first movement inspired by clouds. And then in between is a livelier movement that does actually suggest something in particular. It has a kind of procession come through it. It's almost like there's an outdoor party going on, and this band comes marching through. And I was listening to it again today, and I noticed something that I had never noticed before consciously, and that is how much there's one bit in the Rite of Spring that sounds a lot like when you'll hear the harps setting the beat, and then everything else starts coming in, and it gets bigger and bigger, and the strings start swirling around. Stravinsky was looking at that when he wrote the Rite of Spring. And maybe the coolest thing in the nocturnes, other than the fact that they're just so dreamy and beautiful and the orchestration is so amazing, and it should be really beautiful because Carlos Kalmar is a violinist, so he really knows how to get the strings to make a million different sounds. And that's something that Debussy asks for with different bowing techniques and mutes and dividing the strings and all these different ways. He was ingenious with that, so it should be really beautiful and luminous. But what I started to say, in the last movement only, he uses women's voices in a wordless way They're almost like just another instrument in the musical texture, and they represent the sirens of the deep in that ocean-inspired last movement. So do not let them seduce you, or you might die.
Seduce is the right word.
Look who's here!
Hey.
It's Carlos Kalmar, music director of the Oregon Symphony.
Hi, I'm very sorry for being late.
Oh, it didn't bother me. I had a good time.
Okay, bye.
It's a good crowd. They're very kind. So I think, finished talking about the Debussy Nocturnes, unless you want to chime in with something in particular. How about those wordless women? Want to talk about them? I mean, I've always thought that women should be obscene and not heard, myself, but... Sorry.
I thought that was something regarding children, seen and not heard.
Oh, yeah. Perhaps I'm confused again.
Again.
Where do you put those women?
Okay, I put them over there in the back, but downstairs because because the hall is a little bit problematic acoustic-wise. The further you go away, and if you put them in the choral loft, we would have to mic them, or at least to enhance a little bit.
Yeah.
And this way, it works perfectly well. And well, wordless chorus doesn't happen very often. Somehow the French had something going there. I mean, this piece utilizes women for one movement, and Daphne Saint Chloé by Ravel utilizes an entire chorus, and they never say a word. It's all whatever, French.
Well, you don't have to pay any rights for the poetry, you know. So
that's great.
Save a little money.
The interesting point, I assume you told a little bit about how this piece came about and by what it was influenced. The thing is that I read two very different things about this. One was influenced by paintings, Whistler.
which I didn't mention.
Oh, Whistler. I mean, essentially, Debussy was absolutely in love with painters. He was friends with Gauguin and Toulouse-Lautrec. And so he came upon paintings by Whistler that are titled Nocturne. That's kind of the inspiration. The other article that I read about this piece has actually nothing to do with painting, had to do with poetry. And Stéphane Mallarmé, who wrote a couple of poems with Debussy put into music. Ultimately, the point is that Debussy did rarely write any kind of work that has nothing to do with something outside the music, meaning he didn't write absolute music that much, meaning music just for the sake of music is not really happening in Debussy. He always needs to, this does this does that, and these are nocturnes in the sense of paintings, actually. I think that's what you said.
I've seen one of those Whistler nocturnes, and it was a seascape, a couple of boats, sailboats. Are they all seascapes?
I didn't see that.
I meant to Google that, and I forgot to do it, so I'll do that when I get home.
I just say it's the thing is, on one side, the Debussy nocturnes are depictions of somehow nature, but they are not descriptive in the sense. It's more the feeling you get. Therefore, it's actually, in our day and age, I think it's kind of this program that you're going to hear tonight is a little bit, in the first half, a little bit daring, because you know how it works. You have Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto, and I mean, this is not only great music, but it ends like, boom, the roof comes down, and it's so fantastic. And the first half, well, first of all, Symphony by Joseph Haydn, that's already a master class in little things. And then you have Debussy, and this piece is it's 24 minutes long, give or take 25. Most of it is very quiet, not slightly, very quiet and slow. So the middle movement is somehow a little more vivid, but that is daring, meaning everybody in the audience has to really like, wow, these little colors.
How is the Haydn daring, other than we don't hear the Haydn Symphony number 53 very often?
It's daring because, as unfortunate as this may be, if you're not a huge fan of early classical music, and if you're not a fan of Baroque music, you're kind of accustomed to large orchestras with percussion and timpani and wonderful brass. And Haydn didn't write for that ensemble. I mean, his oratorios are a little bit bigger, but his symphonies, especially the first 70, are just a small ensemble. And they are full of subtleties. It's little things. Actually, the other day, when I was rehearsing with the orchestra, I was myself marveling about the theme in the first movement, because I thought, how can somebody, it needs actually somebody like Joseph Haydn, a great, great genius, to make a first movement with that, because that is, meaning the theme itself is nothing. I mean, it's silly. Have you ever thought that one of the most famous pieces we all know, and I'm not this time talking about Beethoven's Fifth, I'm talking about the Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Mr. Mozart. Good piece, right? That the theme, ti pa pa ta 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 ti ti, that's nothing but the notes of a chord. What's that? Okay, then he goes in, ti ta ti, that's another chord. Wow! Daring. Haydn, the theme for the first movement, is actually the notes of a chord. Da ba ba da da di 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 di. Exactly. Written by God knows who else but Haydn would have been Snooze. Written by Haydn, it's little things. The fact that you hear this theme, and it's very soft. In a way, it's like, let me find something. And then immediately the violins, although softly, answer, but in a different tonality. It's, I mean, when we work together, the Organ Symphony, very often I make up things so that our musicians understand what expression do I want. And probably what I said is, there is this completely silly theme that means not that much, it's just some notes there. And then comes the first violins and say, oh, no, that's the wrong tonality. Let's take another one. And then they all come together, and then the music takes. But these little things make the thing. Another thing that I read about this symphony, speaking of things that are unusual, is it exists in 7 versions.
Yeah, it's got multiple finales. What's with that?
It's all speculation. There is not a document that says it's really because of this. Likely, he wrote, there are 4 finales. 2 of them are probably not even written by Haydn, so they are not even printed. In the score that we all utilize, there are both finales. One is titled Capriccio Moderato, and the other is a Vivace Presto. The Vivace Presto likely was written first. And probably Haydn, upon hearing this symphony, thought, not so great, let me write another one. And then he took the music from an overture that he had started to write and put that as a finale, and there you have it. Most of the times when you hear this symphony, most colleagues, myself included, go for the Capriccio Moderato.
That doesn't sound like a Haydn title to me.
I actually, when I read, the first time I read this symphony, I thought, oh, Capriccio Moderato, meaning there will be something funny in there. And no, it's not. But meaning, you know how Haydn sometimes is, Haydn is one of those composers that, for example, very often he tells you a musical sentence, stops in the middle, you're like, and then he continues in a completely different tonality, like, trick. And so I thought, well, capriccio, moderato, capricious, thought that will happen. It didn't.
It's only moderately capricious. In fact, it's so moderately capricious, it went right over your head.
Yeah.
You didn't even see it.
Well,
even you.
The only thing that happens in the last movement where you think joke is the ending. It's this little. It's a very tiny joke, but at the very last, when you will, I actually think you always get in a symphony the feeling now we are near the end. And in Haydn very typically, because you say, you have this feeling he has said what he wants to say and now he wants to go home. And when you have this feeling, just listen carefully how he formulates the music and what the timpanist does, because that is actually funny. But aside from that, even the title of this symphony, number 53, L'Impérial.
Yeah, one of those weird nicknames we don't really know.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So why don't we just drop it?
You know why we don't drop it?
Because the symphonies that have nicknames get more attention, they get played more.
Yeah, it sells. I mean, don't you think it's actually kind of exciting when you come to a concert and you read the program and you see Haydn 50, you see Haydn 53 and you think like, and? But you see Haydn L'Impérial, you think, regal symphony, let's go. Okay, don't be tricked. There is nothing regal about this symphony.
Maybe it's moderately regal.
Actually, it is. Scholars have not really discovered the autograph is lost, and so documentation is kind of tricky to find, and that's where we find 7 different versions of this piece. It's likely that it's called L'Impérial because it was played in Vienna in court, and it got very popular at the time when Haydn was alive. That's all. But in terms of the first time, years ago, when I kind of went through Haydn symphonies, I thought like, oh, which one have names? And I thought, oh, the bear, okay, something will happen. The philosophe, I thought, not interested in that one, way too complicated for my little brain. Or the hen, I thought it would be like, buck, 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 and it is. And then I thought L'Impérial, very clear. Timpani, trumpets, horns. No, sorry, no trumpets, 2 horns, 1 timpanist, that's it.
But you will make it interesting. He loves Haydn's music. I asked Carlos once what composer is good, in his opinion, to judge other conductors, and he said Haydn.
Haydn,
because there's so much that's not in the music, that's not spelled out, but it's there if you can find it. And
yeah, it is. Because it reminds me a little bit, you know, when you listen to other interpretations of Haydn, of course you always have to admit that being a musician yourself and being a conductor, you're very opinionated, really, very. So it's hard to take that aside, but you expect certain things actually to happen in music. You expect, for example, that the basic speed of the music will be kind of accurate and don't miss it by way long shot. Don't miss the second movement being an andante. Don't make it an adagio. It's not an adagio, it's an andante. But that's for me one of those where I think like, thank you, next. That brings me in a way also to a little talk that I had with Arnoldo, our soloist tonight. Because Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto starts with 8 bars that the piano plays alone.
That's great.
And it is nothing but chords, bass, chord, bass, chord. Now, the question is, how fast? Because, I mean, it says at the beginning of the movement, how fast. Nonetheless, there are so many pianists who would just go and concentrate, and then they go, cling, let me look at the watch, boink. and coffee. And now, it takes 30 seconds until they get to the orchestra. Point in which both Arnoldo and I are like, thank you, next. Because, sorry, the margin of interpretation is only, there is a lot of margin, but only this wide. Don't miss. And by the way, in terms of Rachmaninoff interpretation, if you really don't know anything, Mr. Rachmaninoff himself recorded it. Just listen. It's way, way, way less sentimental than you think. It's just like, okay, go.
When you're talking about the Haydn Symphony, you can feel when you're getting close to the end. You reminded me of one of my favorite spots in the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto. Near the end, there's this wonderful place where it gets kind of mysterious and it's harmonically weird. And it's like, where are we going? This is so cool. It's kind of floaty and surreal. And then it builds from there to the exciting conclusion with, as he liked to do, Rachmaninoff at the end.
Yeah, that's his ending phrase.
Yeah.
Every concert there is Rachmaninoff or something.
I think he patented that. Got extra royalties.
I don't know, but...
You know, I'm really looking forward to hearing Arnoldo Cohen play this piece because I'm a great admirer of him. But I love his tone. He can play that gigantic, heavy machine that's a grand piano and really make it sound musical. And it should be perfect for this piece.
This is undoubtedly... This is not the only signature piece for him, because I have had the great fortune of playing very different pieces with Arnoldo. This piece, we already did it somewhere else years ago, and I did Beethoven with him, I did Liszt with him. I actually can't wait. This is one of the coincidences in life, but next week I am actually in Nashville in Tennessee conducting, and my soloist is this guy.
Nice.
Not Rachmaninoff. Nights in the Spanish Gardens.
Oh, yeah.
Manuel de Falla.
Yeah.
And there in Nashville, if you're an avid concert goer, of course you hopefully know that in Nashville is our former concertmaster,
Oh, that's
Juni
right.
Wasak. So it will be kind of, hey, my guys.
Yeah. Okay, guys, thank you for coming tonight. Wait, huh? What?
I have to say something about...
It's not my fault you were late.
Sorry. Okay. I have to tell this story. Did you tell the story of Rachmaninoff's depression?
No, I didn't.
Okay, at least that has to be there. Rachmaninoff was a very, very talented guy. Great pianist anyway, and at very young age he wrote a couple of things were very successful, and then he had his great premiere, which was his Symphony No. 1. And when you think that you have read in your lifetime bad reviews, you have read nothing, because the reviews treated him so badly. Actually, the most important review he got by then was by a fellow composer by the name of César Cui. And César Cui literally wrote, if there would be any music written for the purpose of those who live in hell, Symphony No. 1 by Rachmaninoff is it.
Well, they would have to have some kind of music there.
But Rachmaninoff? So he went into a depression. He didn't write a note for 3 years. And he just pursued his career as a pianist and mainly as a conductor. And he came out of it through mainly the work of Nikolai Dahl, a doctor who used, amongst others, he was very interested in music, and he hypnotized Rachmaninoff, and kind of in hypnosis told him, you are going to write music and you are going to be great, and blah, 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 blah. Out came the concerto you are going to hear tonight, and from then on Rachmaninoff was fine, because this was a great success. and it's undoubtedly, even though fellow composers were at the time always very snobbish about Rachmaninoff, because they said, how can you write in the 20th century, it was 1900, in the 20th century music like that? Who cares? It's good music.
He was being true to himself, and that's what we all need to do.
Yeah, and he wrote fantastic music, and you have a great pianist, and the orchestra is first class.
This guy's not bad either. Enjoy the concert. Carlos Kalmar.
Robert McBride.